What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another one of our student ministry teaching videos. We are in week 3 of our canceled series where we're talking about our current cancel culture and what Jesus has to say about loving others. This week, we're focusing on loving those that we envy. If we're all honest, we've all probably felt envious of a friend or a sibling, or maybe someone on social media or someone famous. But to get us started today, I want to be clear about what we mean when we talk about envy. So, we're not defining envy as looking at someone's, pair of shoes and thinking like, oh, those are cool. I mean, it'd be nice to have a pair. When we talk about envy, we're going to be talking about what happens when you stop simply wanting or wishing for something and when you let it turn into something ugly like frustration or anger or self-pity or even hatred. Because we've all had a moment or maybe a few when we've been a little envious of someone, and it's easy to make excuses for our envy, and whether we wish we had someone's position on a team or their social media views or their relationships or their perfect family or their scholarships or just opportunities that people have that we don't. It's easy for envy to creep in and take over and cancel out our joy, our contentment, and our self-worth. We start to compare ourselves to others or what they have, and we start trying to replace God with the things or the opportunities people have. And instead of finding our value in God, we try to find our value in those other things. And we get upset when we can and angry. And then we start to cancel the people who have what we don't. And the problem with jealousy and envy is that, it keeps growing and growing. And as it grows, it begins to harm us in our relationships with others and with God. It doesn't just, it starts small and it doesn't just, end. It keeps growing and growing, and it becomes a problem. In the Bible, we actually find a story about a time when envy slowly destroyed a man named King Saul. Saul was the king of Israel, but he had a problem. Because Saul had been disobedient to God, God rejected Saul and chose a young shepherd boy named David to be the next king of Israel. Saul knew that a new king was coming, but he didn't know who it was going to be. And so when Saul first encountered David, he was impressed. David played music for him and even defeated a terrifying enemy for Saul's army. And, maybe you've heard the story of David and Goliath. Goliath was a Philistine warrior that David defeated, the story with just a simple slingshot and God's help. And so David actually also became best friends with Saul's son, Jonathan. And David led tons of missions for Saul's army and always did them well. But the problem is Saul let envy creep in. He saw strength and potential in David, and he didn't like that other people saw it too. And when David was being recognized and celebrated, Saul's envy began to grow. And Saul's envy eventually turned to anger and hatred, and eventually he tries to kill David twice. You can read about that in the Bible in the book of 1 Samuel in chapters 18 and 19. So Saul was no longer interested in celebrating David or recognizing David's achievements. He wanted him gone. Saul's jealousy was so great that he decided to just cancel David once and for all with a spear. And after David escaped, he ran as far away from Saul as he could, and Saul pursued David. He wanted to kill him. And he hunted David from city to city, and his envy was so great, Saul was ready to do anything in order to see David dead. And now, Saul didn't just wake up one day and just randomly decide he wanted to kill David. It started with being envious, and it grew and it grew. And I wish I could tell you that Saul, totally turned his life around and chose to love David instead of being jealous and hating him, but I can't. Saul stopped trying to kill David, so I guess that's good, but it doesn't appear that Saul ever stopped hating him. So, here's what we can do with a story like Saul's. We can reflect on his life and his choices. We can consider how his actions line up with what we know about God, and we can look to the words of Jesus. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, Jesus says this. He says, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself." When you're not sure what to do, we can just come back to these words from Jesus. Whether we're feeling the first hints of envy or you're so jealous that you're ready to throw a spear at someone, Jesus' words can always guide us, that we need to love the people that we envy. So no matter how you relate to David or Saul, I think we can agree that envy destroys our relationships because you can't love and let envy grow at the same time. If you're envious of other people and what they have, you're not going to be loving. So how do we stop being envious? Well, it starts by finding contentment and fulfillment and peace in who God made us. When our contentment is found in Jesus, it becomes so much easier to love others, including those who have things that we wish we had. You have to start by knowing who God says you are, and that's found in Scripture, and finding value in the God who made you. Your contentment has to be found in Jesus, because we can start changing the culture for the better by celebrating each other and loving each other, those who we envy, instead of just being envious and canceling. We can, start by calling out the greatness that we see in others and thinking of ways that we can share the love that we have in Jesus with them instead of being envious. So this week, I want to challenge you to love the people that you envy.